In today's show, we discuss, is the world economy headed for depression?
And now, the TNT Talk Show, daring to go where other podcasts fear to tread.
Hello, I'm Tony Fasulo, and I share the stage with my esteemed friend and colleague, Tayo Boya. Tayo, hello, my friend, once again. I hope you are keeping safe and well.
Yeah, what the hell, Tony? What you gonna do? What you gonna do? Anyway, you asked me to be jolly, so I'm gonna give it my best shot.
Oh, wow. Yeah, please do for a change.
Yeah, honestly. You know, my great-grandmother was a real card. She was a real character. She was so much fun. And we used to play this joke, she and I. And she would say to me, and this is my great-grandmother, not just my grandmother, my great-grandmother. Okay. And she'd say to me, knock, knock. And I'd say, who's there? And then she'd say, I can't remember. And then she'd cry. It's just one of those real characters in life.
I'm a bit dumbstruck as to that comment. I think you should not give up your day job for this humorous part. It's not working, my friend. It's not.
Look, I keep trying all these jokes on you. I never find my jokes funny, man. No wonder I'm depressed. What the heck, man?
It's so bad. I don't know what our listeners think, but I'm sure they'd rather him moan rather than come up with these terrible jokes. Anyway, let's move on with our show. And in today's show, we discuss, is the world economy headed for a depression? Now, you wanted to bring this up.
Me?
Yeah, you did. I think it was you that actually...
I don't even know what a depression is.
Well, a depression compared to a recession, a recession is where...
Oh, I know what it is.
Oh, go on then. I'll let you say.
A recession is where GDP drops in one quarter.
And two consecutive months.
Two consecutive quarters. Yeah. And then a depression is when it drops from 4 or more quarters. So like a year more, a year longer.
Yeah.
That's it. So that's a technical definition, I think, what the economists use.
Okay. So why in your investor economics hat on, do you believe that the world economy is going to head for a depression? I know we've got so many things happening in the world at large. Is that part of your reasoning?
It's based on the fact that the collective IQ of the leaders in the West has, in the last few weeks, been demonstrated to be less than that of an inebriated slug. In all honesty. There's no other way of it's either that or we're going to accidentally wander into one of our little digressions, and we're going to end up doing a conspiracy theory. Because at first I wrote this off as massive stupidity, what the Western leaders have done. But I've come to a point where I can no longer believe it's stupidity. At some point, you've got to think, who is being a mug here? Our leaders or us? And I don't think you can be that incompetent and become prime minister. I don't believe you can be that incompetent and become president. At some point, somebody somewhere is very, very clever, or we're in big trouble. Well, and I'd rather that somebody was being very, very clever and wicked than we are actually in big trouble because we've got a bunch of morons leading us.
Well, the heads of Western governments, by and large, not every single one, clearly, but in my opinion, they are just figureheads. The real nitty-gritty parts of the economy, how things are run, are done from people who aren't front and center. Remember, a lot of the Western world is a popularity contest, and people become leaders not based on their intelligence, not based on their economic skills. It's based on their almost in quotes, you can use the Russian term, propaganda, that they can win over an audience. And
Is
so
propaganda a Russian term?
it's probably not, but it's used to describe a lot of Russian information. So we tarnish it with that term. It's almost a derogatory term, isn't it? Propaganda, like dismissing that.
Propaganda is not a Russian term. Propaganda. I can't tell can't
say it.
I can't say it etymologically speaking. I can't tell. Okay, I'll put it this way. I can't derive an etymology from how it sounds from its phonemes. Propaganda. It just doesn't come from. I don't know where that comes from. But
it's an American term to describe Russian information as it's publicized.
Like, actually not, because Minister of Propaganda was actually Joseph Goebbels in the German regime of the 1930s.
Didn't the Americans come up with it to describe?
I think that was his actual. Wasn't that his actual title?
Propaganda.
Yeah, before he got a bad name, he was Minister of Propaganda, wasn't he? Because propaganda was to propagandize. Was to now let's see, guys, IZE, ISE. That would be that's the Latin, isn't it? So it's Latin. Okay. Propaganda, propagandize, because that'd be the verb form of it. And in those days, it was to publicize. It was just to get out there and tell people, right?
Yeah.
So that before, I think the same Joseph Goebbels was the same person who wrecked the name because of his ridiculous lies. And then he degraded it.
Right.
To sell your point of view, I think was propaganda. So I was
all right. We've digressed from the point we were making.
What was the point we were making?
It was the point we were making that a lot of Western leaders are front and center in terms of propaganda. They can sell themselves. They can sell their ideas, although they're not the ones implementing things.
The Zayford Beeblebrookses.
Explain that.
Oh, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh gosh, yes.
The president of the universe, or was it the president of the galaxy? Remember?
Galaxy.
He was an utter numbskull, but he was good looking. He had all these very, very charming and everything.
Well, exactly.
And that's why he became that is why he became president of the galaxy.
Exactly. I mean, that shows how poor Western leaders are, really, because they model themselves on that. Let's be fair. I mean, look at Donald Trump. You mentioned that the cumulative leaders of the Western world, I suppose, aren't very intelligent. I mean, that is so true.
I've never said Donald Trump wasn't intelligent. I've said he confuses me because I can't tell if he's incredibly intelligent or incredibly stupid. It's very difficult. He is the poster boy of Zayford Beeblebrookes. Zayford Beeblebrookes was exactly the same. He did some things that were absolutely brilliant and followed them up by doing things that were absolutely stupid. And you can never figure out, is this a brilliant person being stupid or a stupid person being occasionally brilliant? And you can't figure it out. And the same thing with me and Donald Trump. I can't figure out the man. We've got an entire episode on Donald Trump. Yes, and that was all through that episode. That was what I was saying, that how do you reckon this guy? You can't figure him out. Joseph Biden, I think, is, sorry to say, Mr. Biden and his family, I think he's just a bit past it. He's obviously having issues. So he gets a free pass because he's not really there, frankly, for me. No, I'm saying that's why I give him a free pass, because you can't blame him. He shouldn't be there. The people who elected him are to blame, not him. He ought not be there.
Name forward and
sorry?
Yeah. He had to put his name forward and people supporting him, and there you go. But
the people who supported him are the problem, because
they supported
5 minute conversation with him, man.
Because of his past.
I think because they could manipulate it.
Possibly.
Which is your point, isn't it?
Well, that's a different story in a sense, because you're saying manipulation. That's slightly different from a figurehead who.
Well, he is a figurehead because he goes to look at his track record. He goes to Moscow. Oh, sorry, Geneva, I think the first time. He goes to Geneva, he meets President Putin. They come out, they're smiling, they've reached agreements on things. We all breathe a sigh of relief. Oh, America and Russia are going to be friends. He goes home. 3 days later, there are unexpected sanctions that come out from nowhere. Then there are these calls between himself and President Putin. And they make these calls and we think, well, they're going to settle issues now and everything will be fine. And the readouts Because you can actually go to, I don't know if you do it, you go to the Kremlin website and you read the official readout.
You can do it from the US as well, from the transcript
you can go to the transcript, you can read it. I don't read the US one, but I read the Russian one. And you get the readouts, and it's all love and affection and everything. And then inevitably, a few days later, something goes wrong. And then look at what just happened a week ago, was it? When President Biden phoned President, is he President? Xi Jinping. Yeah, he is the president, isn't he?
Yeah.
He phoned Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping said, and this is the transcript, by the way, which I didn't read personally, but I read it in the Global Times, which is like the official mouthpiece of the Chinese Communist Party. Mm-hmm. It's called the Global Times. And I read extracts of it from there. And basically, Xi Jinping called Biden a liar to his face. He said, look, you come along, you give me all these nice, wonderful, friendly, warm terms, and we're all going to be best friends and everything. And then you disappear, and then the next thing we know that it's all not what you said you're going to do. It's the exact opposite of what you're going to do. And then President Biden said, no, don't worry about it. We're on top of all this, and it's going to be fine. 3 days later, they sanctioned Chinese officials. Now, you tell me that there's not a pattern there. There's a definite pattern there. Once is an accident, twice is a coincidence, 3 times somebody's doing something. Mm. And speculation online says this Jake Sullivan fellow and the neocons, because I don't know if this is true or not, Paul Biden can't remember anything. So he just says, he's told that, yeah, this is what happened, and that's what I mean by manipulation.
Sure, I'm not sure he can't remember anything, but yeah, the thing is he
did actually say out loud, where am I? I mean, that's a bit much.
Well, we're digressing from what our topics here again.
Damn thing's going to be there.
I mean, your statement about and the topic of the show is the world headed for a depression because of things going on, but that's not normally what tends to happen when a depression is looming. It's normally where there is too much supply for demand. People are pulling back, but that isn't the case. We've just come out of a pandemic, which many people believed, this is the start of a recession, but the recession didn't happen. This economic collapse didn't happen. And we had a global pandemic. We had short-lived recession, and the bounce back was even bigger than before the pandemic. And so at the moment, demand is outstripping supply. So personally, yes, we're having a few issues globally. I can't see depression happening. There's going to be inflation, but that's inflationary pressures because of the demand. People want the stuff. So people are, because of the pandemic, it's restricted some of the supply. I'll give you that. And that's increased people's demand, hence the price is going up. So, that's what I believe.
No, I've got to disagree with you there. You said something which was pretty amazing. You said there's an inflation because demand is outstripping supply. Actually, there's an inflation because, well, in a way, you're right, but I have to correct myself. I have to correct you and me. Correct us both. There's inflation because Joe Biden got into office and then just printed money like it was going out of style. I mean, he pumped, was it 7 trillion into the economy?
Yeah.
And that enables people to increase their demands because then they have free money to throw around. Well, you know very well, money is not free. And that is the reason there's this hyperinflation. And there were warnings. There were warnings from China. There were warnings from Russia. There were warnings from, I don't know, I would say the non-West, when he was, maybe even in the West, and I wasn't paying attention because I don't listen to legacy media or mainstream media in the West anyway, so how would I know? But for the media that I do follow, the presidents and national leaders, they're all saying, look, man, America, this is too much. It's going to be global because America is that economically relevant. There's going to be global inflation. And here it is, there's global inflation. But it would have been manageable if only the collective West hadn't gone and shot itself in the testicles with a shotgun with the stupid sanctions that they levied against Russia. which is going to be catastrophic. It's going to be catastrophic. And we are already seeing the effects of catastrophe. Twice now I've had a shock. Once when I went to put diesel into my car, and the second time this morning. Now I drink a coffee which is what do they call it now? Caffeine free for health reasons. I drink a caffeine free coffee. And the last time I ordered it, because I had to look it up, I was so taken aback by the price. I ordered it on Amazon on the 22nd of February. And this here today is the 27th of March. So it's just over a month later. I ordered it again this morning, and it was £35 from 26 in a month.
Yeah, but
and this is not like my diesel that went up from £1.40 to £1.99.
Okay.
Per litre. Goodness.
But the diesel went up purely because of what's happening in the world at the moment in terms of shortages because of gas, electric, petrol, etc., because of the conflict in Russia. Now, they knew that was going to happen, and it would cause some inflationary pressures because you have to then find other people, other countries that would provide what you've just now cut off, because effectively the sanctions means you're limiting any sort of trade that you used to have to penalize the country, which is Russia. But that doesn't mean you're not going to have effect on other things. I mean, the coffee's rising, nothing to do with the conflict. You still get coffee, you don't get it from Russia, but it's because the whole world is being squeezed somewhat because of what's happening here. But that doesn't mean people see someone else putting the price up. Oh, well, that's going to have a knock-on effect on me, so I'm going to put my price up. You're
wrong. How do you get coffee? And by the way, it's not coffee, it's coffee substitutes. That's why there's no caffeine in it, okay?
But don't they take coffee and then strip the caffeine out?
No, they don't, unfortunately.
So what are you drinking?
Well, it's some horrible concoction, which I can tolerate now. It's a concoction of various things like licorice and bamboo and God knows what. I know. What can I tell you? This is what happens when you don't pay attention to your health when you're young. And then you end up drinking this horrible stuff and calling it coffee. It's okay. It's all right. It's it'll do. Anyway, so
as far removed as coffee as I can.
It is. It absolutely is. I mean, if it wasn't made clear on the label, it would actually be transgressing the law because it's just not coffee, man. But they do make it clear what's in it. I mean, so anyway. How does it get from wherever it's grown into my house?
Well, yeah,
somebody has to transport it.
Yeah.
Well, your fuel costs, man.
Of course.
What about the factory where this thing is ground and blended together? That runs on energy. That's fuel. So your entire the fuel is the lifeblood of the economy.
Yeah.
And when that goes up, everything goes up.
Indeed.
So it's not just a question of just writing it up and saying, it's people putting their prices up. It's people putting their prices up in response to what they're paying. And by the way, do you know what the substitute is that the idiots in the EU, unelected idiots, I like to say, in the EU have gone for? American LNG. First of all, we happen to know because we already heard this before when they started speculating about sanctioning Russia. We looked into it, and already we knew that basically American LNG is at its maximum output right now. Maybe they can jack it up. I don't know. I don't know enough about the energy industry to talk about that. But right now, as I'm speaking to you, they've reached their maximum output, and they have customers. It's not just Europe. They already have customers. Yeah. They weren't having any trouble selling the LNG. Now, what happens is LNG is, number one, it is not open to contracts. Everybody sells it on the spot market because there's no need to do long-term contracts. So that's number one. When you go to Qatar and you say, I want LNG, they'll sell it to you on the spot market. And number two, it's 10 times more expensive than natural gas from Russia. 10 times.
Do you want to explain what LNG actually is?
Oh, sorry, liquefied natural gas. So you get the gas, but obviously to carry, you know how everybody understands gas is quite sort of, very little. If a liter of gas into a liter bottle, you don't get much gas.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what you have to do, you have to compress it down and make it into a liquid.
Yeah.
And store it. And when you do that, it gets really, really cold, and the whole storage kind of problems and things. But it's okay. You can compress it and then make it as this liquid form, which means that you get a hell of a lot more gas, and it's more efficient for transportation.
Yeah.
And then when you take it to where you're going to use it, you let it warm up again. And then it'll just, or decompress is probably a better way of
decompressing it, and then you get
and then you get your volumes of gas again. So that's how it's done. So get the gas, compress it, transport it in ships. I don't think anybody anywhere transports gas, LNG by pipeline. So that's an issue. And then you got the ships that do it. That's not that efficient compared to a pipeline. And then they got to come to Europe, where, by the way, it's just now that Germany, just in response to this crisis, Germany has just decided to build a massive LNG port. And that's going to take 2 years to build.
Yeah.
Right? And even when it gets here and they get this, guess what? It's 10 times the price of natural gas. So natural gas goes to China, goes to India, goes to, I don't know, they're going to can push it as far as Southeast Asia. I suppose if India takes it by pipe, India will then agree to be a transit country, and then they can take it to Bangladesh and all sorts of other places.
That's not in place.
No, it's not. But the Chinese one is in place because they're building a second and a third pipeline.
Yeah, but the first one that was in place is tiny.
Yeah, that is why they're building. That is why they're building the second one.
Yeah, but
and
again,
the Russians,
that's not ready either. That's
it's good. Sorry. It's going to be commissioned either this year or early next year. It's that ready. Yeah. So don't forget about that. This year, in 2022, if there delays, 2023, and then the second, the even bigger pipeline, which is going, I think, is taking a different track, is going into northeast China. That the biggest one of all. I don't know why they're doing that, by the way. Doesn't make sense to me. It's because the industries it's on the West Coast, isn't it? Am I getting my eastern right?
The West Coast, where Russia is, you mean? Where Moscow is? Or you
no,
talking
the other
east,
coast.
East is that side.
Right. That's why they're doing it. Sorry, yeah. I got my
Vladivostok side.
There we go. No,
side.
Okay, yeah. That's why they do, because I was thinking, why the heck are they putting it into the desert, basically, in China? No, you're yeah, okay. North, south, east. I'm okay. I've done the compass in my head, and I know north, south, east, west. That's why they got that huge pipeline going to northeast China, which is, like you said, like Vladivostok, and then down into like all the eastern seaboard of China, where we've got the industries.
Yeah, but that's not something that's just.
And by the way, the
announced.
Chinese, why do they have the industries there? That's kind of silly.
But that's not been announced now. That's been on the cards for a while. Are they
because obviously, well, what would you? I mean, I don't know. I can't tell you the fast tracking because I'd be lying.
Okay, but let's get back on point here. I know they're putting this all in place, this infrastructure, which obviously takes time. This has been not accelerated because of what's happening in Ukraine, all the sanctions. These are all long-term projects. So they've been decided on way before.
You're wrong. No, sorry.
What? They've made a decision on the pipeline since what? Last month?
Since the Germans started dilly-dallying at the bottom of last year over Nord Stream 2.
Okay.
Because Nord Stream 2 was supposed to go ahead, and then it started dilly-dallying, and then Putin attended a meeting with Xi Jinping. Yeah. I don't know what it was about.
End of January, early Feb.
No. That was when he went for the so-called Beijing, whatever it was, the Olympics thing.
Yeah.
I'm talking about one that he did at the bottom of last year, where they took a train, and all I saw was the two leaders sitting in a train. And I think China was showing off his train, new super fast train or something. Now, I don't know what the trip was about fundamentally. After that, then they announced this big, huge one that's going to northeast China. And this was because of what the Germans were doing at that time, which was they postponed, I think what happened, they postponed certification. And that's when the Russians said, "Naff this for a lark," and went and sorted out
hardly
this.
any time frame in order to put an infrastructure project that normally takes years to implement. So
I'm not saying they've done it. I'm just saying that the deals have been struck. China's putting in half of the money, and Russia's putting in half of the money. And when it's complete, in all honesty, they don't need the West. And I don't even think they need the West now when it comes to I mean, it's nice to have the money, but they can do without it. And that's not the point. The point I'm trying to make is that from our point of view, we're going to be paying 10 times more for our... right. So I was telling you what the EU...
Yes. So
I was telling you what the EU is suggesting. So, okay, they're going to buy American LNG. Okay, all right.
So can I just put a conspiracy in here?
Mm-hmm.
Right. The sanctions against Russia for the invasion of Ukraine were driven by the US.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, this is something I've heard recently. And the reason for the sanctions means that if everybody jumps on board, then because Russia is a main supplier of gas and fuel, then other markets will open up to provide the shortfall. And in so doing, because the US is also in fact, they're the biggest oil producer in the world. Did you know that?
I've heard that statistic. So I don't want to argue about it.
Ultimately, what they're doing, they're closing off a competitor in basically they're closing off a competitor for energy, who is a big competitor. And so they're closing them off with sanctions, meaning that all the countries that are also producing the sanctions have to then move away from that supplier and go somewhere else. As you've all rightly said, they've already signed an LNG agreement with the US. And US has also said they're going to, and they can up their supply, by the way, because they've also said they can up their oil supply to offset what they lost with Russia. And some of the Middle East countries will also agree to do that, so they can address the shortfall. So
you have been listening to Western media, unfortunately. I keep asking you to spread your wings and to go outside the Western media.
Hold on. Let me finish. The idea being that the sanctions are to not punish Russia, but to serve America.
Yes, that's what that's not news. I mean,
I know, but
and what you're talking about, what you just said now, is that America will up its output, oil output. Okay, so that's what Joe Biden said. That's the official position of the American government. What seems to have escaped your notice is that the American oil industry has told them that that's impossible. They're talking out of their hat. The LNG industry in particular said, I'm very sorry, we're very sorry, we are already at maximum output. This is what you've missed.
Where was that statement? Because I've not heard that.
Well, of course you haven't heard it. You listen to blooming BBC and things. Who's going to tell you that? Stop listening to that nonsense.
Hearing it from, which is non-American?
I've given you already 2 clues. I've given you the Global Times. I've given you RT.
So the Global Times and RT know more about...
No, it's not that they know more. BBC knows. BBC won't tell you. That's the thing. Sky News is not going to tell you.
Now you're being a conspiracy theorist.
I'm not being a conspiracy theorist. They've not been telling you stuff, and you've been telling me stuff. I just go, and then it happens the way I said it. It doesn't happen the way you said it, and then you're astonished and surprised. I don't know why.
When have you been the sage and predictor of everything?
I've told you the sage and predictor about what's going to happen about Nord Stream 2. Everybody knew Nord Stream 2 was going to be cancelled.
You told me categorically that Putin wasn't going to invade Ukraine. And you said that you got that.
I did actually. That's the one thing I got wrong, because it took everybody by surprise. And I'd say it took RT by surprise too. So if RT was surprised, I'm surprised. Other people were surprised. I don't think the Chinese were surprised, because he did wait until after the 20th. I didn't do it. So I'll put my hand up, because I always do. I'm taking on the chin like a man. I was wrong about that. Many of us who are pro-Putinists were shocked by that. But that is when I turned around and started looking at it. I think I've been played, and we've all been played. And I actually believe, you see, we had this conversation, this is a bit of an aside. We had this conversation last year when I said I was a bit disappointed in President Putin's demands of NATO. because those were not easy demands. Do you remember?
Yeah.
He could have said, let's sit down and work out a security arrangement that benefits both people, both parties, and both parties are satisfied. That could have been the letter. Let's sit down and work out a security, right? But he went this far. He said, I want you to withdraw from NATO states. I want you to withdraw your equipment from NATO states. That's ridiculous. And that's why I told you, I said, why would he say that?
Well, it sounded like he was trying to prove he went down the diplomatic channels in order to because he was already, that was not important to him. He was going to invade anyway and then pre-planned it in advance.
I'm saying that he's looking, I'm saying you're right.
Wrong. That's why he can't be trusted, unfortunately.
I'm saying that you are right. No, I'll tell you. I'll say that he wanted to put, it's like a chess game. You put a piece in a position that it threatens you and you sort of have to take it. You're forced to take it. He forced them to say no.
Yeah, for his own requirements, because
exactly,
his own requirements were made up. I'm going to invade Ukraine. Yeah,
what is more than that? His requirement was shoot yourselves in the foot. The West is going to do things it shouldn't do. I don't know how he knew how far they'd go.
He didn't expect they'd go as far.
Well, he must have hoped it, because that is why he's gotten everything that he wants. But I've said to you that from the point of view of President Putin, he's in seventh heaven. He's been able to cut off the West from his younger generation. He was asked, you see, I missed this. It was a very simple question, and I missed the importance of it. He was asked in a press conference when he does this every year. He does these press conferences where he sits in front of media for 4 hours.
Yeah.
4 hours and hours. And this very simple question, what is your biggest worry today? And he said, birth rates in Russia. That was his biggest headache. So that's what he actually said, and this is an English quote, direct quotation. He actually said, this is what keeps me up at night. This is why I don't get to sleep at night. Russia's birth rate. It wasn't NATO. It wasn't the West. It wasn't Ukraine. It was the Russia's falling birth rate. And it's now that I sit back and I think, wow. And he decided, what's the best way to stop it? Is to stop. Now, everybody knows me and my feelings about gender politics, and I'm not going there. That's not so don't worry, I'm not going to have one on feminism and all that. But that must have been his analysis, that birth rates fall wherever feminism rises. And feminism has entered into Russia, has entered globally through Western information technology and its hand on information. How can you then create a crisis that will lead to either the West saying, okay, we don't want you anymore, or by the way, it could have been in the end Putin saying, if the West hadn't reacted the way that they have, Putin could have said, the way that you're opposing us in Ukraine means you're no longer to be trusted, and we're going to cut off everything. Yes.
You've digressed quite a bit there, but you're focusing on Putin and his tactics for the Ukraine invasion, but this doesn't address the depression element that we were discussing for this whole show, because he's actually negatively affected his whole society. So surely the analyses that they would have had up front to plan, like you say, this chessboard scenario, like if we do this, they might do this. If we do this, we do this. You plan ahead and look at all the different scenarios. There's certain calculations which are out of his control, is how the Western world would respond. Now, granted, he would have expected certain sanctions, because if that's the normal tactic that he would have thought the West would have adopted, he would have expected that. But even he probably would have not expected the level of cooperation from the West and the amount of sanctions he would be subjected to. So your argument about the chess move, you can still make mistakes and you miscalculate your move and go, oh, pardon my language, shit, that was the wrong move. And that's what's happened here. So is it causing a depression? No, in my opinion, because I think is negatively affected the Russian economy, and it's affected it far more than he realized. But the knock-on effect of the sanctions, yes, is produced more hardship for the West, but it's who now makes the next move on the chess piece on the board to see where the next part unfolds. But I don't still believe it's going to be a depression. That's the topic of our talk today. Let's get it back on point. I don't believe
the idea being this: it could have been either party to cut off relations. It was the West which played into his calculations quite nicely. But from what I suspect now, if it hadn't been the West, it would have been Russia to cut off relations. And the idea being to do two things: A, keep his people, keep the youth of Russia, keep them out of Western influence and start doing something about his birth rates again. And B, damage Western economies, really, really hammer them, really push them down, make it so that they've got more problems with banking and with finance and things like that than because when the West is preoccupied with just trying to feed its people, they'll have less time to go around the world being a nuisance to everybody. And that is the depression thing. That is where we start talking about it's a counter sanction that Western leaders didn't even see. They don't even understand. They've been played. They've been played into doing this to their own economy. They are wrecking their own economies. How can German factories compete globally if they're paying 10 times more for energy? How? It's going to take 5 or 6 years.
You're missing the point, really. A lot of these economies no longer manufacture. You see, they've gone past that point. A lot of the Western industries have moved to the Far East because they can pay cheaper for physical labor. What the Western governments have moved up, they've moved up a layer. They've moved up to service level income generation and intellectual income generation that doesn't necessarily need the resources that you're alluding to. So it's a misconception to believe that whole industries, whole economies will be completely damaged by gas and fuel, gas and oil. Yes, they will have to rein it back a bit because they still need electricity. They need to produce that. But if you move away from those fossil fuels and have alternatives, which they do have to a point, and nuclear as well, then you're now cutting your nose to spite your face. Because if Russia's has got an abundance of oil and gas, if the world is being pushed away from that by the fact that you created a war, this is a gamble where they could have just kept on going and still made loads of money because the West are being slow from moving away from fossil fuels. You've now accelerated that. So short-term pain will be long-term gain for the West while they move to fast track to alternative fuels, which are not dependent on fossils, which is, so ultimately, Russia, by doing this, is damaging his economy. And you're saying that maybe the oil and the gas will go to the eastern countries in Asia because they still need it, because they're providing the hardware and the industries to manufacture things. But the West don't need it. And this is just an acceleration for them to move away from fossil fuels. So it's not a tactic that is going to cause a depression and it's going to affect the West so badly. I don't believe it will. I think it's going to be a slight blip and then they'll get their act in order and things will go up. Also, bringing back to the conflict in itself, normally the world bounces back from conflicts, big ones anyway, in a more positive way. There's nothing better for the world than a good war for the economy anyway. That's what's always been the case.
You said the world. I saw a map And I did actually save it for you. And I wish I just had it ready for this conversation. I saved it because I suspected we were going to mention this during this conversation. And the map is very interesting. It showed all the nations that have sanctioned Russia. It's this. It's the EU, it's Canada, America, Australia, New Zealand, Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it, Tony.
That makes up 90%. Well, China excluded, I suppose. But if you look at the GDP wealth of all those nations, that's pretty sizable.
Right. So it still might be sizable, but it's not the world.
No, I know it's not the world.
No, but you said the world. So let's not say the world.
Okay,
let's say the West.
The West.
Okay?
Yeah.
Let's say the West.
Seen as they're the biggest producers on the planet.
But you're contradicting yourself, you see, because you said that the West is giving up on manufacturing.
Yeah, they have.
That's what you said.
Much.
I didn't put it into your mouth, right?
Yeah.
So they've given up on manufacturing and they're doing services and intellectual thing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that works as long as the people that are manufacturing for you are so happy to be manufacturing for you.
But they've got to sell it to somebody.
Well, do they really? Because when you put China and India together, you got 25% of the population just in those. Actually, it's more, isn't it?
It's
40% of the population, is it?
It's both of them together, just under 3 billion, and it's nearly half the world. Yeah.
So there you go. And that's just two of them. And then, like I've said to you, the rest of the world is not really on the side of the West. I mean, let's not tell a lie. Saudi Arabia is not even taking America's phone calls right now.
Oh, well, that's nothing to do with that.
Well, maybe it is, and maybe it isn't. I don't know, because Qatar's told them to now off too. Anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked because the point I'm trying to make is this, that globalization, as we see, is dead and buried. We're going back to nation states producing their own things. And Germany is the driver, is the factory. If China is the factory of the world, Germany is the factory of Europe. Because we don't manufacture diddly squat here in the UK any longer, which is stupid of us. We manufacture very little. Either we're going to get it from China or we're going to get it from Germany. Now, all the cars on the road, I didn't even realize this until I happened to travel to Germany for work a couple of years ago. I didn't even realize that all the cars on our roads are German. It was only because I was on an autobahn and I was looking at the same cars I see in UK every single day. Audi, Mercedes, this, that, and everything. Volkswagen. And I suddenly said to myself, well, where are the British cars?
There are British cars.
And then I realized, but not in Germany. And then I realized, hang on, there's so many. You got an Audi? You've got an Audi. You've got
BMW. You got
a BMW.
Porsche, you got Volkswagen.
Right, that's what drives on. Those are what is driving on the roads in England.
Yeah.
What the heck? What happened to ours? So all I'm trying to say is, our factory is Germany. That's globalization for you. We outsource.
That's just an observation that you've made, and you've now come up with that.
Well, what I was in Stoke-on-Trent.
Okay.
A few years ago.
Yeah.
And I was told that I went around in a taxi one day. I said, take me around. I wasn't driving myself in those days. Said, take me around, let me see the town, because I've been working there for a while and I hadn't, And the guy gave me a brief history of the place. And this is where we used to get all these places. So do you remember back in the 70s, you used to have all these cutlery, not cutlery, what do you call it? All this clay, China, thank you. All these China pots. And I remember them with little blue filigrees and everything. Do you remember?
Yeah. I've been and done a tour of the factory, yeah.
Right, and they've all gone. I said, well,
they haven't gone.
They said they've all gone. They've all moved to blooming China. That's where they've been made now.
No.
Shoes? Where are shoes here in Northampton? Where have they been made now? At least I live here. You can't tell me no. Where are all the factories now? Yeah.
They're still here.
There's one. What? They're still here. It used to be chock block of
yeah.
That's thank God I came back to Northampton.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
It used to be everywhere.
Yep.
Well, where's everywhere now? Everywhere is now in China. It's not here any longer.
It's India.
India?
Mm.
What the hell are they doing in India?
Clothing and footwear is predominantly India.
Well, I'll tell you where they're not. They're not in Northampton.
No.
And
Okay.
you know, when you just glibly said, yeah, they're still in Stoke-on-Trent, is it like here, like our shoe factories that used to be all over the place here? Is it like that? Because I saw the same thing that I see here in Northampton, where you say that used to be a factory, that used to be a factory, that used to be a factory. So it has moved out. We don't manufacture.
Yes, but we've
All
already
right.
agreed to that. They've moved to service industry and intellectual services. That's where they've moved to. Because if that was the case, if manufacturing has gone, as we've now agreed, what's been replaced? Because we haven't got a massive unemployment problem here.
Well, in
People
the
have
UK,
changed.
we do finances.
Yes,
That's
we
us.
do.
That's us here in the UK.
That's a service, isn't it?
No, yeah, it's a service. That's what we do in the UK.
Yeah.
And Germany is our
computing, by the way.
manufacturer.
And
Sorry?
computing, science, design. So we still have industries.
Isn't that all in America now? In Silicon Valley?
No. There's a
Anyway.
Silicon Valley in the UK. But we're digressing again.
Anyway, the reason it's going to be a depression is because, let's say, I don't know, working from home, for instance, right? We work from home now, and you say, well, we're all service people, and we're all going to work from home. But our phone bills go, you keep distracting me, Tony. You keep stopping me from telling you about Van der Leyen and the EU.
Okay.
So they're going to be paying 10 times as much for their energy.
Yep.
How do you think they want to pay for it? You want? Well, I don't know. Do you know what Van der Leyen said?
No.
Okay, she's going to pay for it. The EU is going to pay for it. They're going to have a common policy, and the EU will buy the LNG and then distribute it, and the EU will pay for it and subsidize it. Subsidize it with what? Basically, they want to print money.
Yeah.
How long is that going to last?
Right. Okay.
I mean, subsidize it with what?
Right. Let me clarify something very quickly. When you say subsidizing, what do you think quantitative easing is? That's where
creating money out of fresh air.
Yeah. You're devaluing your currency by printing more of it, effectively, because you've got more in circulation. The value goes down. Now, all currencies, when they moved away from the gold standard, they set up this what's it called? The Bretton Woods.
Bretton Woods.
Yeah, Bretton Woods standard, right? And then in the 70s, the America, I think it was Nixon at the time, pulled away from that so that the currency became loose, away from gold. It wasn't tied to gold. And everyone obviously nowadays moans and says that's not good, blah, blah, blah. Well, it hasn't served them incorrectly since then. It hasn't gone to pot. It hasn't brought a recession. It hasn't killed the dollar. In fact, the dollar underpins pretty much everything at the moment worldwide. So the IMF was born from that, and the World Bank, etc. But we haven't got time to discuss those. But what I'm saying is, when the US themselves were moaning at China for doing it to its currency, devaluing its currency, because China's yuan wasn't linked to gold because they all abandoned it after that, the 70s anyway, because they could see that linking their currency to gold was actually not effective long term. So that's why they unhinged themselves from gold and made it a free economy, a free, what am I saying, currency. And all the world has done it. So it's not just one, everybody's followed it, Russia included. So, you saying that it's all going to go to pot, a depression, because there's nothing underpinning the currencies, they're all fiat currencies, but people look that up on Google because they're not going to explain what that means here. But the gold standard was abandoned, and all the currencies have now gone freestyle, so to speak. They're no longer linked to physical gold. They're now almost at the mercy of the financial markets around the world. And they are, because you can see currencies being affected by global conditions, because it's markets, people, investors looking and thinking, well, do I want to buy that currency? Do I think it's got value based on what goes on in the stability of the country? So it's more complicated than what you're saying in terms of, it'll be a depression because they're printing money. Everybody is doing it. And as long as the currency has some value, either manufacturing, as you've already said, or a service or finance or intellectual information, it will still have value. So that means there's a demand somewhere, so it will not be a depression.
No, you made a couple of mistakes in your analysis there. When this quantitative easing started, I thought we were going to crash and burn, and I was really shocked. This was in 2009, I think, in response to the 2008 meltdown. And I thought, well, that's it. We're doomed. We're finished. And year after year, nothing happened, and I was shocked by this. And it only struck me one day that, yeah, they were printing money, but I wasn't seeing any of it. I wasn't getting ridiculously rich. I don't think you were getting ridiculously rich. Whatever was happening with that money, it wasn't trickling down to the likes of you and me. And the difference is that what happened in response to COVID, when they started handing out money left, right, and center forward, I did get a bit of it. And I don't know about you, but I got a bit of it. Maybe others got a bit of it. And certainly in America, people are getting a bit of it, lots of it, which is why they were able to chuck in their jobs that they hated and leave their jobs in droves. And that's why we finally saw inflation, because finally there was money running around that trickled down.
Yeah.
Okay. The other thing you said is, what did you say? The dollar is up and up. No, the dollar is actually dead. Because if the West doesn't buy rubles, then Putin, who, by the way, Russia has never broken the contract. Did you know that?
Okay.
Not ever. And what they're going to do this time is that they say, we're not going to break our contract, because some people are saying we're not going to pay because the contract is the currency is already denominated in the contract. So the Austrians, for instance, said, yeah, we're not going to pay that. It says in our contract, it says dollars. And they know that Russia has never broken its contract. So there are two options. One is for Russia to say, well, okay, we'll agree now, but because of that, we will never sell you oil or gas again. Maybe the Austrians will shrug and say, no problem. But more likely is Russians will say, well, that's fine. Gazprom is allowed, it will not break its contract, but just as the West has put us on the sanctions, we are now sanctioning you, and we're not going to sell you any more gas. And it's not that we're breaking our contract, it's just that we're putting you on the sanctions, just like you put us on the sanctions.
Yeah. So
that's that. So that way, they're either going to prop up the ruble, or they're going to damage their own economies, at least in the short term, because I think within 5 or 6 years, we can build ourselves nuclear power stations, or we can fire up the coal stations, whatever it takes, we can get back on track.
Yeah. When
the true cost of cutting off ourselves from Russian gas becomes apparent, I think we'll find ways and means to manage. But it's going to take years. I would say a minimum of 2 years. And that's pretty
2 years is what they're saying.
Yeah, I think that's hyper optimistic. But okay. 2 years, 2 to 5. I think I'd be comfortable to say like 6 years it'll be fine. Because by then we could have built nuclear power stations.
Yeah. Which is what the small baby nuclear power stations,
yes,
although they're still
fast reactors. Is it called fast reactors or something?
They're quick. They're using nuclear submarine tech because it's very small, and it allows.
Guess who's the leader in the field now? Russia. Never mind. Not important. Dollar is dead. I'm saying, because it's only the countries that sanctioned Russia that have to pay in rubles. Everybody else is fine. But it's one way of propping up the ruble. And the ruble has appreciated against the dollar in the meantime. The next thing is that Russia is
appreciated against the dollar in the meantime. Have you seen it? Where it's fallen from? It's fallen off a cliff when all the sanctions started, and it's recovered. Yeah. It's like saying, oh, you've...
Anyway, it's appreciated when everybody thought it would be dead and buried. So it's not dead and buried. It is appreciating. And people are beginning to appreciate one other thing, because we're talking a lot about fuel. Food, man. I've understood this for a long time.
Yeah, food is more of a problem.
I've understood for a long time that fuel that's why he's starting with fuel. That's why, in my opinion, President Putin is starting with fuel. He's testing the waters, say what's going to happen before he brings out the big guns. And it's not even food. Food is the middle gun. The big guns are the metals and the rare earths. Like the biggest problem Russia faces today is its airline industry. I've read an article where it says Russia can absolutely do nothing about its airline industry because all its aircraft are from the West and they're not going to sell them spare parts. Now, it's not like you can just cannibalize things infinite amounts of time. Tires run out within 6 months, I'm told.
Yeah.
So you take tires from a few planes, you put them on, those will run out. So definitely in about a year's time, the fleet, which I believe are hundreds of aircraft, will be kaput.
Well, I mean, we're focusing on Russia here, where this is supposed to be a show on the whole depression of the planet. So I don't see, I mean, we're focusing on the ills of Russia.
I was about to say, because of the rare earths, I was trying to prove a point that with the rare earths and with metal, which is it titanium? Comes from Russia, titanium. Airbus has said they can't manage without titanium from Russia. That they've shut down their factories. Now, Boeing said they have enough. They've got enough stock of a stockpile, and they're fine. And they have alternative sources, but they didn't make it clear what those alternative sources are. But Airbus said they're going to shut down. And I'm wondering what other when the metals stop and the rare earth stop, when the neon stops. For what is it? What is it? Chips?
Yeah,
for chips.
Hold on. Yeah,
when those things stop, then what? Then we're talking more and more.
They are not the sole.
70% of neon comes from Ukraine. 70.
Yeah.
And comes from the part of Ukraine that Russia is going to sit on.
Mm-hmm.
Not the other part, right? And don't forget who buys neon? Because who's the world's chip manufacturer? Taiwan. Guess what? Taiwan was stupid enough to put sanctions against Russia. So now they have to pay in rubles. And maybe they'll say no.
I'm not believing it's as cut and dry as that, because there are
70% of it. Yes, but 70%. Nobody's going to make up 70%. Right. And some of these things, like titanium, it comes from Russian soil. So what's your alternative?
The alternative is Africa. Did you know that there's so many of the precious metals in Africa that because of current regimes and things that's going on in Africa, it hasn't been exploited. They've gone to the easy option, which was Russia, because they're more established and able to get it from. But as soon as this gets closed off, you think the world's going to, it is what it is. They're going to have to go and look at elsewhere. And those markets, which are not established in Africa currently, will become prominent. So this will benefit Africa more so than anybody else, especially for the precious metals and even for a knock-on effect for fuels, etc. And please, I'm going to ask you for final points here, because we are really reaching the end of the show.
I don't believe you've convinced me that there's going to be a catastrophe. And I think you've been too glib and saying, oh, we will. But it's all what the EU is saying. People like our leaders, it's all, look, first of all, they sanctioned Russia. Then they went looking for oil. That's not planned. That's not how you plan things out. That's not a sign that tells me any of this is well thought out, properly planned, well considered. If it was like that, they wouldn't have run to Venezuela, they wouldn't have run to Iran, they wouldn't be running around like headless chickens now. Absolutely. And then just to tell me it's all going to be okay, don't worry, it'll work out, and I'm not convinced. That's my final point.
The way that it works is that they don't plan for these things, but they have mitigation in place just in case. And you know about mitigation anyway, but they do this. So they have to resort to plan B, that they don't want to resort to it, but then they have to dust it down and go, come on then, what do we need to do to make it happen? So you're right, it doesn't appear immediately, and on the surface it sounds a bit unprepared and headless chicken mode, but they do actually have these plans in place. They just have to resurrect them, and there we have it. Okay, we're finally, with that last thought, I managed to get an end word in, which is great.
I almost let you have that last word.
Unfortunately, we have reached the end of the show for another week.